Here is an overview of your fiscal sponsorship agreement with Camp Kesem National as a chapter of Camp Kesem. As you can see, this is a legally binding document, mostly in order for us to ensure that as a chapter of our 501c3, you're abiding by the same standards and bylaws that we have set forth to be a successful organization. So as we scroll down, you'll see the first section is about the use of funds, solicitation of contributions. We understand that you are a chapter of Camp Kesem National, and we do fall under the same umbrella, the same 501c3. So every donation that you get is technically a property of Camp Kesem National. However, we understand that you have solicited those funds, and so we earmark them for your chapter. We hope that's a mutually beneficial relationship that we have, and we understand that you put in the work to get those funds. This also notes that you will be receiving the rollover of your chapter's funds every year, so that would be your reserve in your bank account. The next section outlines our operating standards, which you are familiar with, as well as the fact that Camp Kesem National is your overhead, and so we provide consultation services, which is pretty much the role of your program director, in order to make you more successful. Section 4 outlines the chapter fee, which your program director should be overviewing with you, but it essentially is saying that Camp Kesem National bills you for a certain amount due to the the age of your chapter in order for you to pay us back for a lot of the services that we provide. So this just outlines that as a chapter, you're going to be required to pay that to Camp Kesem National. Section 5 talks about the intellectual property rights. So as you can imagine, for any organization, our resources and our materials are the property of us. So you can't necessarily make a copy of all of our workbooks and resources and use them for your own benefit to start your own company, to share with a friend who will then use those to start their own company. This is intellectual property, and we have the rights and trademarks of them. Same thing with the copyright. As you scroll down, you'll also notice that this is your name. So Camp Kesem National identifies you as your official chapter name, which you will use for promotional materials as well. Publicity rights, which are pretty straightforward. You can read those on your own. Section 7 talks about the term and termination. We obviously understand that you are an autonomous chapter. However, you are abiding by our rules and guidelines. So if for whatever reason you are not meeting the standards that we have set forth, we will kind of deal with that as it comes. There will be many steps before we would ever choose to determine to terminate your chapter, but it is something to note that we do have the ability to do so if it is something that we need to move forward with. Again, this is nothing to be scared of. It's just really noting that if it is necessary to terminate your chapter, we have the right to do so. And this kind of walks you through reasons it would be terminated for whatever reason. Section 8, in your counselor application, you actually sign a confidentiality agreement, mostly because you're coming in contact with a lot of sensitive information and private information of our camper families, counselors, and staff. So this is just important for you to abide by. And Section 9, so a piece of your chapter fee covers the use of our insurance. We have a policy of insurance that we use to cover you as a chapter, so that's just something to note. Section 10, indemnification, is basically a really fancy way of saying that we have a mutually beneficial relationship. So if you are abiding by these standards and guidelines, we will back you and we will support you if something were to happen. So for example, if a camper got hurt at camp and the camper family decided to sue you as an individual, even though you are working for Camp Kesem, we would do our best to provide you with legal services and anything that we could do to back you. This is mostly because we know that you are a volunteer of our organization and we want to represent you. With that said, if you were to break any of these guidelines or standards, for example, you started embezzling money, that's not something that we are going to necessarily back you on, because we distinctly told you that that was something that was not allowed. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. It talks about severability and the authority to execute an agreement. That kind of talks about the fact that your program director will be signing any contracts. Section 13, the force majeure, is basically a legal way of saying that any contract that we sign, we have the right to potentially back out if there are unforeseeable circumstances. So you'll typically see this verbiage on campsite contracts, make the magic contracts, and as a highly functioning 501c3, this is something that you are able to do legally and put on a contract because you have us to back you. The remainder of this document goes into the appendix, so it outlines where you will sign, and then it also goes through our operating principles along with a lot of other pieces more specifically that I elaborated on. If you have any questions, obviously talk to your program director. Otherwise, you will sign below.